Hello, this is Foy Manor with Paramount Technologies, and thank you for attending the Project Travel, Time, and Expense webinar. There's a lot of information to cover in this webinar in a short period of time. This is a high-level overview of the functionality available within Workplace to set up capital projects and budgets for those projects, enter time against those projects, and also look at our travel request functionality and our expense reimbursement functionality. Again, these are high-level overviews of the functionality that we offer. We integrate to many different back-office financial and ERP systems, and also within some of those integrations, there's specific functionality to that product. So during the webinars that we conduct on a weekly basis, it's simply impossible to show and talk about everything that we do, but these webinars will give you a really good idea of the overall functionality that's offered within Workplace for those particular areas. We are more than happy to schedule one-on-one demonstrations with you where we can focus specifically on your needs and on your requirements with your back office financial or ERP system, and you're certainly welcome to contact us via our website, which is the same place that you signed up for this webinar, and we'll be glad to help you there. But what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation this morning. I will allow time at the very end of the presentation for questions. If you want to enter questions as we go, there is a question window as a part of the WebEx, or excuse me, as part of the GoToMeeting webinar that you can use in order to enter your questions there. I'll check those at the very end, and then we'll also allow you to raise your hand at the end as well and ask questions via audio. Workplace is a web-based application. All of the users that log in do so via their browser. There's my address bar and URL up at the top of the screen. I'm going to log in as a system administrator to begin with and look at the setup of a project. So we're going to log in, and when you log into Workplace, you start off on the home page, and the home page contains a synopsis of your to-do list, outstanding transactions, announcements that you've been allowed to see, as well as any reporting or metrics that you have available to you. Obviously, I'm logged in as a system administrator who has access to pretty much everything that we do. You'll see as I log into some of the other users, then the view here will be much more concise. But no matter what you have access to, your drop-down here on the left-hand side contains those areas of functionality. And as you drill down, in this example on project, then you'll see that the screen and look changes to the functionality that revolves around that project. So we're going to come in here and we're going to go look at a project that has been previously set up and established. I'm just going to choose one of those and walk through some of the fields that are available. So we've got a project ID, Acme-US, for the Acme company. So there's your ID and description. There's check boxes here that tell you where that project can be used. Today we're going to focus on projects that are related to our Workplace Time and projects that are related to our Workplace Expense solution, but we also have a requisition and purchasing solution that can integrate with our project application as well. That tells you where it can be used. You can also define a project manager, and we have a very simple approval process so that you can make sure that that project manager is always a part of the approval process simply by checking this box. And then down here, towards the bottom, you've got different comments that you can enter, and you've also got attachments where you can attach additional information and enter additional information about this particular project. You've got budgets that you associate with the project. The budgets can be by amount, by unit, or by both, depending upon how you want to record that and then what interfaces you're using, whether it's purchasing, time, and or expense. The beginning period, the ending period, for that particular budget, your budget amounts or your budget units, and then what is remaining on that budget. You can immediately view the amount details down here at the bottom of the screen. The details will show you what you budgeted and where any dollar amounts or units are in that process with what you have remaining, and that's the setup of the budget for the project. Projects also have phases associated with them, so if we come in here and we choose a phase, then you're going to be able to see the ID, the description, where that can be used. You've got a beginning and end date where that phase can be used if you want to choose that there. Project manager, approval by project manager, and then you've got your budgets here as well. So you can have budgets by phase that would be available to you as a separate budget than what you had entered on the project. and then the amount details there as well. And then as a part of the phase, you have activities. So activities are going to also have where it can be used, when it can be used, and then a budget associated with that one there as well. So what we've done here is we've set up a project, phase, and activity. We can define budgets at each of those levels. And then now as we go in and enter transactions, you're going to have those transactions tracked against those budgets that have been established. So that's the setup of the project. Again, logged in as a system administrator. We're going to log out, and we're going to log in as a user who has the ability to enter time and also enter expenses. So we're going to start off with time entry. So again, I logged in, home page, metrics, outstanding transactions, and then the other functions that you have access to. So when I click on time, you got your outstanding transactions for this user related to timesheets. Outstanding transactions are transactions that need action. At least one line on the timesheet has not been fully processed. And when that's the case, you'll see the timesheet here. You'll see a status of the timesheet. If different lines have different statuses, you'd see where those are in the process. And if you needed more details on any of these transactions, click on them, open them up, and there's additional information and additional details that you can view for each of those timesheets. You've also got the ability to find timesheets. You can always go back in and find any and all timesheets that you have access to as a user. So that would certainly be your outstanding transactions that are already showing up here, your historical transactions that have been fully processed, and any other timesheets that you're allowed to view as well. As an example, if you're a department manager and you have the ability to view time for other members of your department, then you'd be able to use this query here to look up and find those. So as a user, you always have the ability to go back in and see where your timesheets are, what has happened to them, what needs to happen to them as they're going through the different steps of the process. I'm going to click on timesheet entry. This is going to allow me to enter time against those projects, phases, and activities. Again, specifically today, we are discussing time entered against workplace project. We also have our time integrated to other project systems as well. So if you're running a different project system in one of your back office financial or ERP systems, then please contact us and we can let you know if an integration has already been done or what it would take to do an integration to those, but all of this is going to be very similar. So first off, these are the fields that are associated with Workplace Project that are available on the timesheet for this user. This happens to be all of the fields available in this particular example so that you can see them here on the screen. Now, obviously, if we're integrated to a different project system, then you're going to have possibly different names for fields and different fields, and then that would show up here based upon that project system as well. No matter what you're doing from a timesheet entry standpoint and how you're integrated to the project system, you're always going to be able to hide fields. So if there are fields on the screen that do not apply in your environment, maybe the user does not know the information, you don't want them to see the information, or they just typically do not enter the information, then you can hide these fields as well. If you hide fields, they are removed from the screen. The user cannot see them and will not even know that they're there. You could also make fields read-only. An example of a read-only field would be grayed out. You could see the information, but you would not be able to access it or change it. You could default values in the field, so if there's a constant value for a user, like in this example, earning code or labor group, you could default those values in, and the fields would already be populated. You've got required fields, and required fields are noted by an asterisk next to the field, so you've got to enter information into those fields before you can successfully submit the timesheet. And then each of these fields has a magnifying glass next to it. If you click on the magnifying glass to the right of the field, or if you double-click in the field to the left of the magnifying glass, you will do a lookup to another source of information and be able to use that information when you come in to fill out the timesheet. Along with those lookups, you can also restrict and control the information that's available as well. So you can limit a user to only have access to their projects, earning codes, labor groups, phases, activities. That way they cannot accidentally make a selection that you don't want them to be making, and they also do not need to search through unnecessary information in order to find what it is that they're looking for. And all those things that we just talked about, the ability to hide fields, make fields read-only, default values into fields, make fields required, as well as the restrictions on the lookups or zooms are all by user. So individual users, depending upon who they are, what they do, or where they work within an organization, have different access and different views to information when they come in to enter their timesheets. All right, so let's spend a minute or two and just enter a couple of lines on this timesheet. First off, up here at the top of the screen, you see an employee field. That is the employee that the time is being entered for. Now, we're logged in as Jake, and I can tell you that Jake can only enter time on his behalf, so that is the only option that Jake has here. But if you did have situations where you had other users able to enter time on behalf of other employees, then you'd be able to select that employee here. Now, you do still need to be a user of Workplace to have time entered on your behalf, but again, you'd be able to have the logged in user pick the employee in this field, and that's who the timesheet is for. You've also got the period of the timesheet, and then let's come in and do a lookup on the projects, and we'll select a project and a phase to be able to enter time against. I do have earning code and labor group as required fields, so I do need to enter something in those particular areas. But again, you could default values into those fields or even hide those fields so that they would not be something that the user would have to enter. And then you can begin entering the time that you worked for that project and phase on the cells that are over here to the right. So we worked 2 hours on Monday. You've got a comment field down here at the bottom where you can say that this took longer than expected, and then put in the reason or justification why. That is a comment that is associated with that particular cell. You'll see an icon appears there to let you know that there's a comment there. If you worked additional hours on the following day, then you can put in those additional hours, and you can have a different comment show up for that cell as well. You could duplicate a line. If you duplicate the line, it'll duplicate the fields on the left-hand side here, and then just make an appropriate change and enter the number of hours that you may have worked on that particular project and phase. And again, you can have different comments there if needed. And you can also enter time against other projects and phases as well. Pick those, again, make your additions of the fields that are required, and then put in the hours that were worked on that particular project and phase. At any time, you can save the timesheet. When you save the timesheet, it would remain as an outstanding transaction that had been unsubmitted, and you could come back into it later and add additional lines. You can always print timesheets. You can print them in an Adobe Acrobat PDF format. You can import timesheets. So you can import timesheets for offline purposes. So if you need to be able to enter your time offline in a CSV template, you could do that and then import it here to create the timesheet. You can duplicate timesheets, pull up a past timesheet, duplicate it as new, make any changes, additions, or deletions, and then submit that timesheet. And you can also attach files, click, choose the file that you want to attach, describe that, and then that's a part of this timesheet to provide additional information and additional details to the other user. The icon changes to a paperclip around a piece of paper. That's how you know that there is an attachment there to provide the additional information on that particular timesheet. So that is timesheet entry. When you submit the timesheet, it will route for approval. There are unlimited levels of approval. There are unlimited approval paths. So you can make sure that this timesheet and all the lines on the timesheet are fully approved before they're ever available to go over into the project system that you may have set up and established, or our own project system as well. All right, so that's entry of a timesheet. We're going to walk through entry of an expense sheet here in just a moment, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities. As you can already see, we're logged in as Jake, and Jake can enter time and expenses. So from a single login, you can do both functions here. So as we walk through the expense process, we'll talk more about the approvals and just understand that the approval process is very similar to what would happen within the time process after that had been entered and submitted. So I'm going to click on expense, and we're going to look at outstanding transactions. Again, open transactions for the user, at least one line has not been fully processed. In this example, you can see a name of the expense sheet, status of the expense sheet. If different lines have different statuses, you'll see where those are in the process. If they're waiting for approval, you can see who they're waiting for approval from. So that's a quick view of your outstanding transactions. Again, if you're using the time product, very similar information as to what we looked at there. And you can drill down on any of these and get additional information and additional details for each of those transactions. You've also got the ability to find expense sheets. Again, you can always go back in and find any and all expense sheets that you have access to as a user. That would certainly be your outstanding transactions that are already showing up here, your historical transactions that have been fully processed, and any other transactions that you can view as well. If you're a department manager and you have the ability to view transactions for other members of your department, you could use this query here to look up and find those. Again, very similar to what we talked about on time entry. Now let's do let's do an expense entry here. And again, these are the fields that are available to this user to be able to enter information on their expense sheets. These are the fields that I've chosen to make available to this user. These are not all of the fields that are available. There's other fields like freight and miscellaneous charges that I have hidden from this particular user. And also, if I still have fields here on the screen that do not apply in your environment, maybe the user does not know the information, you don't want them to see the information, or they just typically do not enter the information, then you can hide these fields as well. If you hide fields, they are removed from the screen. The user cannot see them and will not even know that they're there. You can also make fields read-only. So here's an example of a read-only field, GL account. We'll talk a lot more about GL account codes here in just a few minutes. But again, just note that that field is grayed out. You can view the information, but you cannot access it or change it. You could also default values into fields. So if there's a constant value for a user, default that in, that field's already populated, and you wouldn't need to enter anything into that field unless you need a different value for that particular line. You've got required fields. Again, required fields are noted by an asterisk next to the field. And you've got lookups that you can use to go to another source of information and use that to fill out your expenses. And just like on time, you can restrict and control those lookups so that a user cannot accidentally make a selection that you don't want them to be making, and they also do not need to search through unnecessary information in order to find what it is that they're looking for. And all those things that we just talked about, the ability to hide fields, make fields read-only, default values into fields, make fields required, as well as the restrictions on the lookups or zooms, are all by user. So individual users, depending upon who they are, what they do, or where they work within an organization, have different access and different views to information when they come in to enter their expenses. All right, so we got a couple of different types of expenses. First one we'll talk about is a travel request. So a travel request is pre-approval before the trip occurs. Now, entry of a travel request and entry of an expense are going to be very similar. So again, the difference is you're making a request to travel. So you've got your employee field here. Again, that's the employee that expenses are being entered for. And in this example, it's a travel request type expense. Again, like we talked about on time, you still need to be a user to have expenses entered on your behalf, but that's the selection of that field. You've got the name of the expense sheet. So if you're going to a conference in Atlanta, then you can enter that. And then you can begin entering the information that you have discovered. So airfare on AirTran, and put in the cost of the ticket for that. If you need to enter a currency other than the functional currency of the company you're logged into, you can make that selection here. You've got your department, and you've got the expense type to help you identify that transaction, and any comments that you want to make there as well. Let's say we also looked at hotels, and we're going to stay for 5 nights, and it's $189.65 a night, and then the expense type for lodging that we can choose there. So we can research, find out the information about our travel, put in that information onto the travel request here, and once we've entered all of that information, including attachments, if you have attachments, then you can submit that expense as a travel request. It'll route for approval, and then once it's approved, you'll be able to come back after your trip and then tie your expenses to that previous travel request. So again, this is a travel request. You are making this prior to the trip being taken. You're entering the information that you know that you've researched and found out about your airfare, your hotel, in maybe an airport shuttle, whatever it is that you need to enter there. You're submitting it and then having that route for the approval process. So that will now go through the approvals, and then once you're done, once you're done with the trip and that travel request has been approved, you're going to be able to come back in and you're going to be able to enter an expense. And when you enter an expense, up here at the top of the screen, you can select from approved travel requests. So click there, and you're going to be able to see the lines that have been approved on a travel request, and then you're going to be able to click there and load those lines onto an expense sheet. So now we're doing an expense sheet for the purposes of reimbursement, and this is for a conference in Atlanta. So we've already, we got that line entered there. We've already got our airfare entered. You'll see that there's our airfare on AirTran. That was the amount that we got pre-approved, and that is what the ticket costs. So we'll just leave that amount like that for there. Now, we've got our hotel at the Hyatt, and maybe we got to the hotel and we had somehow made a mistake. It wasn't $219. It was actually $249 per night. So we can enter that there. Once you enter that there, you'll see that the amount that was approved stays right here on the right-hand side. The new amount appears right here. So the amount was different. You can have an approval routing based upon that variance. So you can have that line go for approval because of the variance of what was approved by the travel request and then what was actually entered there. Now, hopefully this person will enter comments and they'll tell you, why it was more expensive, and then they can justify it, and you can decide if you're going to approve or disapprove that. Now we can enter more lines. Obviously, we probably had some things that weren't on our travel request, like breakfast. And we can enter the cost for breakfast. Now, down here on the General tab, you've got your department that expense is for. You've got your expense type. Now, we use the expense type on the first 2 lines to identify the expense. We're going to use it on this one to choose breakfast and identify it there. And again, you can have comments for each line as you're entering them on your expense sheet. Now, we have tax schedules, so if you are not in the U.S. and you're entering expenses in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, then you can tie it to the tax schedules that are set up in Dynamics GP, in your back office financial or ERP system. And you'll see here that it ties that line to the travel request. So you know what travel request that original line came from. So that gives you the backup data there. Let's do mileage to and from the airport. And it's a 75-mile round trip. I don't need to remember what my reimbursement rate for mileage is. Just need to make sure I pick mileage, and that'll put in the rate for me and do the proper calculation. Let's say that we also had dinner with a client while we were on the trip, and we'll put in the cost of that dinner. And now we're going to use an expense type of entertainment. So we've used the expense type to identify our expenses, to calculate a rate for us, and now we're going to use the expense type to have specific questions be answered. So there's a little icon here that's a questionnaire, and I need to put in the company name or names that I entertain. I need to put in the person's name or names that I entertain, and I need to put in what their titles are. So these are questions that are very easy to set up and configure within the application. It allows you to get specific answers based upon the expense type. They're very easy to set up, and they can be used for things like entertainment, as we're doing here. For mileage, enter your beginning address, your ending address, your beginning odometer, your ending odometer. They can be used for airfares. enter your ticket number or your departing flight, your arriving flight. For hotel stays, enter your arrival date, your departure date. It allows you to track specific information about that line, and you can make those required so the user will have to enter them. Let's do one more line here. Let's do a daily per diem limit. So we're allowed to spend $45 a day on meals. So I can come in here and I can put in my meals. I can do an expense type of meals. And then when I save or submit my expense, I'm going to get a warning that my daily per diem is exceeded. So I have a hard stop that it will not let a user enter more than what they're allowed to daily by expense type. So you see that we get the warning on the line. I realize that I accidentally put a 1 in front of that, so I'll correct that, and now that's a valid line. So this is your option. You can stop the user from being able to enter that expense, or you could allow that to go through, and if you allow that to go through, then you could allow that to go through, and if you allow that to go through, then you could just simply have an approval routing based upon that as well. So instead of having a hard stop, you could route those meals for approval based upon the expense type and the amount there, and let the approver make the choice of whether or not you're going to approve or disapprove that. So again, it's just another option that you have. Now, we've been using the expense type to identify expenses, calculate rates, enforce daily per diems, have questions be answered, and we've also been using the expense types to define the general ledger account. So by department and by expense type, we've been building our GL accounts this whole time. So you'll see that for my airfare, the GL account is travel for consulting and training. If I move down to breakfast, it's meals and entertainment for consulting and training. And if I change the department on either one of those, then it will change the general ledger account based upon that selection there. So if your users know your GL accounts, that's fine. You can let them choose from a list of GL accounts. If they don't know the GL accounts, which is what we typically find, then they should certainly know the department that they are entering the expense for and be able to enter the expense type for that. And then when they enter those, we'll build the GL account code for you. You'll also see blank paper clips next to each line and a blank paper clip up here on the upper right-hand side. Attach individual receipts at the line level. So we'll attach our dinner receipt for that entertainment of a client that we've got there. The icon changes to a paper clip around a piece of paper, and over here on the right-hand side is an inline attachment view, so you can see an image of that attachment right here on the screen. Let's say we can attach all of our other receipts at the header level. So we'll go find those other receipts and then attach those there, and you're going to be able to view, you're going to be able to view those there as well over here on the right-hand side. Up here at the top of the screen, you can import expense sheets. Now this import right here is an import for offline entry in a CSV template format like we talked about on time. You also do have the ability to import credit card transactions. So you can download credit card transactions from the credit card company, and you can import them and then have lines available to the user. And if you're doing that, then you see where it says select expenses right here. We can click there, and then you're going to be able to pick those expenses that are applicable in this particular example and then add those to the expense sheet. You see there's a little icon that lets you know that that record was imported from a credit card there, and then you've got the details for that particular line. So again, import for offline entry, import by credit card. You can also print expense sheets, duplicate expenses, pull up a past expense sheet, duplicate it as new, make any changes, additions, or deletions, and then submit that expense there as well. And we're going to submit our expense sheet. When you submit the expense sheet, it will route for approval. There are unlimited levels of approval, unlimited approval paths, just like we talked about on time entry. You can route for approval by the total amount. You can route for approval by the amount of the line. You can route for approval by a variance from the travel request. You can route for approval by department, GL account, expense type, tax schedule, card name, payment method. So it's possible that each line on the expense report could go to a different approver or through a different approval path based upon the information that's been entered. So you can send it to the department manager because of the department. You can send it to finance because of the amount. You can send it to the controller or the CFO because of the expense type, And if you're integrated to a project solution, you can send it to the project manager because of the project. Again, unlimited levels of approval, unlimited approval paths, details. You can view the details that will show you a status of the expense sheet, the approval path. You can see that Justin and Bob need to approve in this particular example. If there were more than 2 approvers, you'd see the entire list of approvers. The arrow and the bold print indicate the pending approver, which is who we're waiting on to approve this before it can move on through the process. You've also got alternate approvers. Alternates can approve in the place of the original approver, and if an alternate had been enabled or activated, you would see who that was here. And you've got a log, which is date, time, user, and action of everything that happens to the expense line as it goes through the process. This same view that we have here under expense sheets is also available under timesheets, and I'll have that information for the user for each of those entries. All right, so let's log out as Jake. Whether it's timesheet entry or expense sheet entry, we send out email notifications. The email notifications will let you know that you have transactions that are pending your approval. You can see the details, the comments, and there are links in the email. If you click on the links in the email, it will take you into Workplace and allow you to approve or disapprove those lines. You can also reply to the message. If you reply to the message, there are brackets in the email. If you put a Y into the bracket, you're going to approve. If you put an N into the bracket, you're going to disapprove, and you can enter notes to the creator of the timesheet or the expense sheet, and those notes will go in an email and also appear on the log for that line. So you can reply to this message, and it will approve or disapprove without needing to log into the Workplace application. You do still need to be a user of Workplace in order to get the emails and to be able to approve, but that is the functionality that's available if you choose to approve in that manner. There's also alerts that you can establish. Alerts are based upon a number of hours. So if you have items that are pending your approval after 24, 36, 48, whatever number of hours you determine, you'll get another email. The email looks just like this, but it's a reminder that you have items that are pending your approval. All right, so let's log in as Justin. Justin's one of my approvers. And when you log in as Justin, you can see he's got a to-do list, and he's got 7 items pending approval. And Justin could also approve time as well, very similar process. Click there, you get a load screen. The load screen allows you to be selective by these values or ranges of those values. Leave them all blank and click on load. You'll load all items pending your approval. You load those by expense sheet, expand the expense sheet that you want to work with. There's your comment and attachment indicators, your questionnaire, your line details, your general tab information, the actual comments that were entered, a view to the receipts over here on the right-hand side so that you can see the information on one single screen without multiple clicks. You've got notes to the creator. These icons allow you to enter notes such as plan better next time for that expensive flight, and that note will go in an email and also appear on the log. When you're ready to approve, you could approve all or disapprove all up here at the header of the session. You could approve or disapprove entire expense sheets, or as we will do in our example, we'll approve individual lines by clicking on the check mark. We'll disapprove by clicking on the minus button. If you disapprove a line, then you can enter a note to the creator. And if you can see here, this was dinner with a client for a conference in Atlanta, $165.32. The receipt is from Houston, Texas, and it's for $101.93. So they obviously attached the wrong receipt. So we can tell them in our note to the creator here to attach the correct receipt and resubmit. And that note will go in an email and also appear on the log for that item. And when you disapprove, it goes back to the creator of the expense. When you approve, it moves on through the remainder of the process. Process that session. More emails will go out. Emails will go out letting you know that items were disapproved, letting you know that items were approved. Last thing on approvers is alternates. Slide this little button to the right there, and you've now enabled your alternates. You're not picking who they are. You're simply enabling them. so that they can approve in your place. You also can schedule your alternates. You can schedule them with from and to dates, and they can approve during those periods of time. And if you forget to enable your alternates or you do not schedule your alternates, a system administrator can activate the alternates on your behalf. Alternates can approve in the place of the original approver and keep items moving through the process if someone's out of the office or unavailable for any reason, and then you get the same email notifications there as well. All right, so that is a quick overview of project, time, travel, and expense within the workplace application. In just a moment, I will open up the floor for questions, but I do want to remind you that we do realize that that is pretty quick. We do realize that these webinars are not interactive. We do record these sessions, so you are able to watch these sessions again if you like, but we're always willing to be able to do one-on-one demos to discuss your specific needs and your specific requirements with you based upon your back office financial system and the functionality that may be available within that. So please feel free to contact us, and we are more than happy to provide those demos for you. I do thank you very much for your time today, and if you'll give me just a moment here, I'll go check and see if there are any questions.